Welcome back to the Knowledge Shared series from the recruiter's perspective. And I think I thought by the third time I'd be able to say that without a blip, but just basically, we're talking with Alex about his knowledge in recruiting and also just I think people should really know a little bit about your background of what you have been in this industry for many years, and really diving in and talking with both manufacturers and distribution and the end users as well. So just a lot of knowledge that you bring to the table. You've already shared about the job market as it is today and how it's changed over the past couple of years, and gave us a real snapshot that we can look at and see, okay, this is the real market today. And it makes sense. And I won't give it all away, but it makes sense how we're feeling today. And so I do hope everybody, goes back and listens to your other series on the job market. And then, how do we attract talent to our organizations? So take a look at that if you haven't. Of course, we'll be, putting all this together for our viewers. But now that you need the talent, what kind of plan, how do you hire the best person? What is the best practices there? And I'm really excited about this conversation. But I will set you up, Alex, to be the talker here. I'm Charlie. I'm with Empowering Pumps and Equipment, and we love to connect, inform, and educate the industry. And that is definitely about bringing in experts like yourself. So Alex, I'm going to turn it over to you with just how do we hire the best people for the job?
Thank you so much, Charlie. And of course, yes, you're right. I have long and deep roots in the pumps industry, going back all the way to the beginning of my career when I was doing market research. I actually published the first centrifugal pump study that at my employer at the time. I've done economic work over the years, and so I've made presentations at the Hydraulic Institute and many other associations that the pump industry loves to get involved with. But right now, you're right. I am coming to you as someone that has a recruiter's perspective. I represent Miller Resource Group as the Director of Analytics and Consulting, and we're really looking at what companies need to do in order to stay relevant and competitive in this very tight labor market. So I talked to you about how different things are today relative to even just a couple of years ago. We looked at what makes companies attractive to top talent, but where the rubber hits the road is when you get them into the interview. How do you handle that, right? That's the key element that we're going to answer in today's episode. I am sharing my screen now, and as you can see, the whole focus from the research that I've done is how do you get more efficient and effective in increasing the throughput of your hiring activities, meaning how do you actually hire more of the people that come and interview for you, and what practices, what tactics do you employ to really help you achieve your hiring objectives. So we're going to start by talking about the big elephant in the room, I guess before I do that, I want to talk about why I think I'm going to be able to share insights that are practical and actionable, and it really just from real world experience. At Miller Resource Group, we've done a lot of work in this area. You can see just in the last few years, we've had almost 1,000 people that we've placed in different positions across industries. We've talked to thousands upon thousands of candidates with tens of thousands of conversations. So we know what works and what doesn't. And one of the things that we're hearing both from candidates and from hiring authorities is that HR departments of companies large and small are completely overwhelmed. They cannot cope with everything that is on their plate. So I thought I'd start by talking a little bit about how recruitment and hiring is just one of the litany of things that your HR manager is trying to do for your organization. Everything from training and employer-employee relations to managing the company culture, managing benefits, handling discipline, creating safe work environment. And that list just goes on and on and on and on. And when you think about how much is involved in recruitment and hiring, it's very evident that it is impossible to ask a small HR department to do all of these things exceedingly well. So the key thing that you have to realize is that in this war for talent, and I think that it is a very astute term to describe what's going on, because you really are competing with other companies in your own industry, with other industry sectors for the same skills, the same limited pool of candidates. You have to have two things. You have to have good quality information, and you have to have allies. You cannot do it on your own. You've got to find a partner for your recruiter internally. You've got to find external partners that will bring you insights and help when you need it. And that's the way that you're going to be able to get ahead of the curve. So when we're talking about this one subsegment of what an HR department does, it is related to getting the word out, to attracting people to your organization. And there are many different ways that companies can do that. Job boards, temp agencies, career fairs, social media. But there's only one category on this list that gives you access to a completely different pool of candidates. And that, of course, being recruiters. So my advice to you, and this is not particular to Miller Research Group, but you have to find yourself a good external recruiting partner that can give you access to what we call passive talent. So what is the difference between the people that are typically coming into your door, that are applying to your job postings, and this magical subsegment of the job market, which are passive candidates? So active candidates are typically the folks that will respond to job postings on your website or to any paid advertising that you do through Monster or LinkedIn or Indeed. These are folks that are usually unemployed. They're actively searching for work. They've probably set up a bunch of job alerts using Google search and Google Words, and they're actively applying using what I affectionately refer to as the shotgun approach. They're just sending resumes out into the void, recognizing that they're probably not going to hear back from 90+% of the positions that they're applying for, but they're going to give it a shot anyway, because one of their search terms align with something in your job description. And you can't get away from that. That's an important part of the job market for sure. There are currently 6.3 million people that are active candidates. They're looking for work. But passive candidates are a completely different story. These are individuals that are currently employed, and so they're not searching for work proactively, but they are open to having a potential conversation. They might be browsing LinkedIn and seeing all of these posts that I'm sure all of you seen. Oh, I'm hiring for this position or for this position. And to themselves, this person thinks, well, that's an interesting opportunity. Maybe someday I'll apply to something like that. But the key here is that they won't apply unless they're personally engaged to do so. And that's exactly what a good recruiting partner for your company can do for you. They can reach out to the person, they can sell the message, they can market your organizations, as I mentioned in the second episode, and they can compellingly deliver a story of why that person should consider the opportunity that you have for them. And that, of course, is going to be a very different conversation. So you're essentially looking at a smaller but vastly more potent pool of available talent. And why is it a good idea to do the process with both active and passive candidates? Well, because of the efficiency of it. For every active candidate, you have to interview 11 people on average to fill an open position. For passive candidates, it only takes 4. So it's almost a 70% gain in throughput and efficacy of your hiring process if you add this into the mix. And yes, of course, there is a cost associated to partner with an external recruiter. But the way that I really want you to think about this is the similar way you think about the housing market. If you go and buy or sell a home, you're not likely to do that on your own, right? You're going to have a realtor that you're going to pay a fee to because of their knowledge and expertise in that particular sector. They know the policies, they know the laws, they know where to look and where not to look. They know what to ask, what not to ask. And that's the kind of expertise that a good recruiter will bring to your organization. They'll be able to attract candidates to your company that normally you wouldn't have access to. And as I mentioned, yes, there is typically a fee associated with a service like that. But again, the ROI on that investment is massive because we can see continuous improvement is the goal of your organization when it comes to hiring. A good recruiting partner, or external one or an internal one, is a key element of that continuous improvement for your organization. So if you have not practiced partnering with an external recruiter, or even if you are on the far end of the spectrum and you actually have negative feelings or some sort of animosity towards recruiters, I ask you reconsider, because in this marketplace, it makes a huge difference. Now, I'm sure you have your valid reasons, but not all recruiters are made the same way. There are those that are just interested in flooding your inbox with resumes. that's basically the same thing as an active search. But a good recruiting partner will have a detailed conversation with you. They will seek to understand exactly what it is that you're looking for, what the profile of the ideal candidate is, and it is in their best interest to bring you only the qualified people, the ones that will actually be a good fit. They don't want to waste their own time sending you just a bunch of resumes that are not going to be a good fit. So again, this is, I think, a key element of building a recruiting strategy is the recognition that you can't go at it alone. You need allies in this very hyper-competitive, candidate-driven job market. The second thing that I want to talk about here is you've got to streamline your process. So we have access to a great number of candidates in our database, tens of thousands. And I recently conducted this survey and I asked, how many interviews should it take before an employer shows you that they are genuinely interested in having you work for them? And as you can see here, the predominant majority said 1 to 2, over 80%. So if you are still the kind of organization that insists on conducting 4, 5, 6 interviews with your candidates, and you think that by making it to the next round of interviews, your candidates are actually going to feel good about themselves, I'm asking you to reassess that analysis. This really should be a huge call to action for you, that if your process involves more than 2 interviews, you have to ask yourself, why? Why are we doing it like that? Because from the candidate's perspective, that conversation is just a repeat over and over and over again. Myself is a perfect example of this. Last summer, when I was going through a job search, I had an interview with a company that was the perfect fit. I really knew their business. I was their economist for 6 years, so I knew their product lines, I knew their regional markets, I knew their go-to-market strategy. I was the ideal candidate. My first interview was with the HR gatekeeper, the generalist. They said, you know, Alex, your resume looks really good. You would be a good fit for this job. I'm going to recommend to the hiring manager that they have a conversation with you. 2 weeks later, I finally speak to the hiring manager and she says, Alex, you're perfect for this job. I'd love to have you on board. I just need you to talk to my boss. 3 weeks go by. I'm finally talking to the division boss and he says, Alex, my God, it's like you were born for this role. You know our business like the back of your hand. I'm ready to give you an offer. I just need you to have a conversation with my business unit CEO. And that person, unfortunately, is on vacation for the next 2 weeks. So another 3 weeks go by. I finally talk to the guy and he says, Alex, you're in. You're just watch your inbox. An offer is coming. And then 3 weeks of silence. And when they finally came back, guess what? I was already gainfully employed somewhere else. And I see this process repeat itself, particularly with smaller companies where people fall through the cracks, other priorities take the attention. Sometimes it's the business owner or the CEO that's also the HR department and the marketing department and the sales guy. And so the key element here is you have to be more efficient and you have to be a great communicator. You cannot let it go more than 2 or 3 days without having some sort of touch point with your candidates. If you're letting it go longer than that, with all the choices that people have, I promise you, you're going to be missing out on some of the key talent. And so this idea that you should streamline the process and be a great communicator is an absolutely integral component to an effective market strategy. Now, if you don't feel comfortable with offering someone a job after 2 interviews, then I've seen companies implement some very effective tactics. For example, people have gotten into the habit of doing trial periods, a 15-day or a 30-day trial. Look, we really want you to come on board. We're just not 100% sure that that's going to be a right fit, both for you and for us. Why don't you come and try it out? And what we've seen is that actually is a great signpost to success, because a candidate is not going to sign up for a trial period if they don't have the intention of making this be their permanent full-time position. And then that gives the reassurances that they're actually a good fit for the job, right? Because you don't really get that sense during the interview process. It's all about selling yourself. The candidate is selling themselves to the company is selling themselves to the candidate. But until they're actually in the job, interacting with their peers and doing the work, there's really some ambiguity there of how well it's going to work out. So these trial periods have been great at actually easing people into the positions across the spectrum of industries. So that's the key element, though, is try to be more effective and more efficient when you're bringing people on board and going through your hiring process within your organization. The other element, and I touched on this earlier, and this is probably one of the most important things that I can share with you during the series, is when it comes to pay, you have to be making your decisions and the offers that you extend to your candidates based on reliable market data. The changes that we're undergoing through on the compensation side right now are so drastic and so fast paced that it is really, really important for you to get away from the mentality of, well, we've always offered a starting salary of $75,000 to an engineer just out of college, and that's what we're going to continue to offer. It just doesn't work anymore. So I have actually uncovered a great tool that I'm bringing to the marketplace as an offering, as a consultative offering, that will give you the information that you need. And the tool is called Labor IQ. So what I really love about this tool is how detail-oriented it is, how granular you can get with the parameters. You can see you need to specify the location of the job, the number of years of experience of a candidate that you're looking for, the size of the company in terms of the employees and their annual revenue, the education level that that person has, and this is the key part, the differentiating factor for this particular tool, the NAICS code of the industry sector that you're operating in. So to give you this example, I pulled a design engineer that's working in the pump and compressor manufacturing space in, I believe it's the Dallas area. Yes, the Dallas area. They have 4 to 6 years of experience. The company looking to hire them has between 20 and 50 employees, between $10 and $50 million annual revenue. And again, it is in your industry. And the output of this is so interesting. So the median salary shows you this is basically what the average person already in the job makes in this position with these parameters. The recommended salary is what you actually have to offer someone in order to get them to say yes to the job. And you can see that information displayed down here on the bell curve. So here's the median, but the recommendation is somewhere between, call it $80,000 and $90,000, maybe 80 to 85,000, right? So this is what it takes to bring in talent, because the current supply of this kind of person in this particular market is at a significant shortage, and it's going to take a premium to get that person on board. In this case, about a 10% premium over what most of your people are currently making in that position. So it really takes the emotion out of the conversation. This provider of data, they're a third party. They have no skin in the game. They're not going to mislead you to the upside or to the downside. And so if you're having a negotiation with a potential candidate and you put down a report like this on the table in front of them, it really says, look, we've done our research. The offer that we're making you is based on competitive market rates, and you should not think that we're trying to undercut you. We're using analytics to make this decision. So the companies that I've worked with that have used this kind of approach to hiring have been much more effective and have seen much higher throughput in terms of actually getting candidates to accept the offers that they're making, rather than those that say, well, we've always hired this way. There's one other element that this is really helpful with, and that is the dichotomy between what new people coming into the organization are getting offered and what the existing people are currently being paid. You can use this platform to do an analysis of the install base of your existing workforce and say, which are the people that are currently underpaid relative to what the market rate is, and so are at the greatest risk of leaving the company because they're going to get a higher offer somewhere else. What that gives you the ability to do is actually take that conversation to a proactive one. Sit down with the individual and say, look, we've identified that you're making below market rate. Let's put together a plan that's going to help you get there over time. Or perhaps let's discuss some other things that you might be interested in that are not compensation driven, right? Because a total offer is not only about salary. As we discussed in last episode, money is not always the top priority for people. Some of them care about vastly different things. And you have to remember that when making an offer to a candidate, it does make a difference what industry you're in. As you can see here, an HR manager can make $95,000 in nonprofit sector or almost $120,000 in finance and insurance and everything in between. But it's not all about money, because the levers that you can pull are vast. It can be extra PTO. It can be work from home arrangements. It can be backup childcare. We've seen that as a very interesting new offering emerge in the marketplace, so that people that are dealing with COVID, let's say the kids get sick, or their school is shut down because there's an outbreak, they have a backup solution and they can still come in to work for you. But it gives you the ability to essentially engage in a proactive conversation with your employees and think about the way that that makes those people feel. Like you're genuinely interested in their well-being. You want them to have competitive market rates, and you're bringing this information to them proactively. So I think that, between partnering and, arming yourself with good quality data, that's a really big part of having an effective hiring strategy for your company. The last thing that I'll mention is metrics. And this is something that most companies could implement fairly easily, but they just don't because they haven't prioritized it. For example, if I were to ask one of you, a CEO of a small to medium-sized company, what is your offer to acceptance ratio? How many of you can answer that question? Meaning, for every offer that you put out there, how often do people say yes? What is your interview to offer ratio? What is your time to fill? What is the applicants per hire? The key element here is, if you want to get better at this part of your business, you have to measure it, and you have to track it over time, and you have to see if you're getting better, worse, or staying flat over time. Now, most companies already have some element of this data available to them. They're just not communicating up the chain of command to senior management, who actually have the power and the resources to bring about the change that's necessary in order to facilitate those improvements. So I guess the key parting message that I want to leave you with is that look at the data that you have, see how you are currently leveraging it, and if not, identify people whose responsibility it will be to analyze the metrics and then communicate to those in power that can make the change necessary to drive improvement within hiring practices for your organization. Now, Charlie, I know that that is a lot of different things to consider, but I promise people practical, actionable advice. I hope that we've covered many things that companies can actually implement here to see the improvement that I know many of them want to see.
Absolutely. And thank you, Alex, for sharing your story. I think that really resonates on why you're so passionate about recruiting today. Fix this process, and you really will retain the attract and retain the right talent. I think that the series has been awesome. I hope everybody will, if they haven't already listened to the other two sessions, that they will, because it really is about bringing in all strategic leaders within a company to think about, how do we attract and retain talent? And how do we create a story and a message that says, this is a sexy industry to be in, and we want you here, and we care about you, and we want to see you develop within our organization. I just think it's been a really wonderful series, Alex. Thanks to you for bringing your expertise to us. And I just can't wait to bring you back on for another, we can call it a series, we can call it a webinar, a podcast, whatever, but just thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. That really is helpful to our industry. And me personally, I feel like I have learned a lot about this process.
Wonderful, Charlie. Well, thank you so much for having me. And to all of you out there, thanks for spending the time to better inform yourselves, and good luck. It's going to be a really interesting process, but I know that all of you can get better given the tools that I've provided over the last 3 episodes.